for franchisees out there, entrepreneurs, people that want to take that leap, what's the mindset they should have? Like, what creates success and what's going to create failure that needs to be avoided?
The reason why you can be successful is because you can go with the mindset that I'm going to build this thing. Don't compare yourself to other people, other franchisees. You can learn from them, but your only competition is yourself the way you were last year. I'm going to get better every year, and you got to grind.
This is an important conversation, or at least a fun conversation, not just about franchising and building an amazing franchise company in a retail consumer space, but really the story behind Tint World, the journey for Charles Bonfiglio, Jeanette Bonfiglio, and some really great deep dives. Charles, this is sort of strange because we talk almost every day, right? So now it's a different stage here. Charles, we're talking every day. You're building Tint World. When I leave my office, I'm here in New Jersey, you're in Florida. I just smile when I pass Tint World locations. And then as I reflect on it, speak with my team, I think there's so many things people don't know about you, your journey. I mean, it's just an amazing story. I know you have corporate headquarters going up soon, locations all over the country, but I think this is a great time to really connect with, the deeper story here.
Yeah, and Charles, by the way, it's a pleasure to be here with you and share some of my endeavors and how I got to where I am and why I do what I do. It's just been a really never-ending evolution of growing from a franchisee to a franchisor.
People are thinking about franchising their business, emerging franchisors, brands that want to get to where you're at, right? And just for framework, and Charles can explain it, we're Tint World Automotive Styling Centers. These are retail locations, right? Serving consumers, and not such an easy business to expand and build out. But behind the scenes, at least for me, when I'm looking from the inside, I see a company focused on technology, consumer services, consumer marketing, and franchise outlet locations. So, Charles, in terms of journey, I guess basically, what is Tint World, just from a basic standpoint?
Tint World was something that I dreamed when I was 21 years old. As a teenager, I was a car guy. And I started to do really good installing car stereos and customizing cars. My first car was a Chevelle, went on to a Trans Am, a turbo Trans Am. I was lucky enough to be able to work at a young age to be able to afford that. And then I bought a Corvette. But I was doing businesses in New York that I just fell into. It wasn't something I just did right out of high school. My father had a clothing factory. I did that. And then my brother-in-law wanted to buy a pizzeria. He needed a partner. I did that in New York City, right around the corner from the Empire State Building. So really cool stuff. But I learned a lot what I knew and what I didn't know. And then I decided I wanted to do something that I really loved, and I loved cars. So I told my parents, I said, I want to move down to Florida. I love palm trees and cool cars, and I want to go put up a car stereo shop that does aftermarket accessories. And they were cool with it. It took me about 6 months to plan it. I sold my car. I used all that money that I saved up and just took 2 suitcases and a one-way plane ticket to Florida and just tried to find my own way.
I have to ask, what year was the Turbo Trans Am?
It was a 1981 Turbo Trans Am. It was the second year, I believe, that they came out with the term when they perfected it. And I had it for about a year. And then then it got stolen from my house. And I have pictures of it. Like I found it. It was all on the side of the road, burnt up. And then I went to the auction in New Jersey, and I found an 81 Corvette, which was even nicer, but I couldn't afford a new one. So I got the 1-year-old one, and that was another fun car. And I put a custom car stereo in it. And everybody used to ask me, hey, can you do my car? And I said, do it. They should tell me, you should do something with that. I'm like, yeah, one day I'll make $1 billion with it, just as a joke. But when I came down to Florida, I didn't realize, the landlords didn't want to lease to me. The banks didn't want to lend to me. They thought, this kid from New York, what does he know? And so then I found franchising. That's how it started.
Wait, so you're in Florida. You start your automotive shop, right? And by the way, you're talking about cars I wish I could have afforded, right? But so you open up your shop. How did things go after you started the business?
Well, I didn't really ever open up the shop. So when I got the no from the bank to get the loan to open up a shop, I came down, I had a good amount of money from the car sales and from having the other businesses, had about $30,000. At that time in 1983, that was a lot of money, but I still needed more to open. I had a plan of about 80,000 is what I needed to start the business and operate it. But I found this one property in, it was an auto center, had a precision tune, a Jiffy Lube in it, a Lee Miles transmission, and it was a brand new building. These went in, there was one space on the end. So I went in to talk to the landlord, and I said, I want to take the end space, and I want to be, a car stereo shop. And he said, well, we don't have anything for that. I'm like, what? You have these other brands? Yeah, but those are brands. You're not a brand. I'm like, well, how do I get to be a brand if you don't let me open my business? I have a great vision. I worked I had businesses in New York, and no, I'm sorry, that doesn't work for us. And so with that, I figured, okay, let me go to the bank and I'll see if I can get a loan. And it was similar to the same thing. I went to Wells Fargo Bank, which I opened a bank from when I was 17 years old, and went into the one in Pompano Beach from my one-bedroom apartment I got. And I said, I want to get a loan for a business. I have 30,000. Here's my business plan. I need 80. Can you lend me like 50? And she goes, no, we don't have any loans for that. I said, well, what do you mean? Aren't you a bank? She goes, no, well, we only lend to businesses that are existing or new or a brand. I'm like, but how do you become a brand if you're not going to get me started? I just wouldn't understand it. But I was nice to her and I was learning. And she said, I'm sorry, I can't help you. So that's how the no's started coming. But I'm down in Florida, and I actually went from a '81 Corvette from New York selling it, and I wanted to save my money, so I bought a $3,500 Ford EXP that was 4 years old to be able to just keep my money and drive and save. And a one-bedroom apartment, I don't remember what it was, maybe $800 a month. And so that's how I started. And then I got a job at a car stereo store to figure out maybe I'll learn the vendors, I'll meet some technicians that maybe want to get my store up, and I'll buy them. So I was there for a few months, and then my mom calls me up and she says, Charles, we're having a family wedding in New York. Why don't you come down and we'll come back up to New York and see all your cousins. I said, okay, Mom. So when I went up there and went to the wedding, a cousin of mine asked me what I was doing, and I kind of told him what I just told you. And he said, yeah, you're smart. You'll figure it out. I said, I know, but what are you doing? He goes, well, I just opened up a Meineke discount muffler shops in New Jersey. I says, Meineke, that's mufflers, right? He goes, there's money in that? He goes, yeah, him and his brother, they're doing really well. They've been doing it for about a year, and they're getting ready to open up a second one. And they both bought houses out in New Jersey and cars. I'm like, wow. And he goes, yeah, it's a franchise, like McDonald's. He goes, yeah, something like that. And he goes, they give you a blueprint of how the business works, a roadmap of how to build it, and they help you get the lease and the financing. I'm like, wow, that's everything I need. He goes, yeah. He goes, well, why don't you come out and visit me before you go back to Florida? I said, great. So I was so excited to learn what he was doing. And I went over to my dad who was at the wedding. I said, Dad, can you take a ride with me on Monday to go see this business out in New Jersey? And, cousin Roland and Michael Giuliano, they built this thing and I want to learn about it. My father, of course. So that's how it started. And we drove out there. When we looked at the place, it was a little gas station, 3-bay gas station converted to a Meineke muffler shop with a smiling muffler sign on the building. It wasn't anything fancy. It had a gravel parking lot, but it was busy. I told my dad, I said, look, they got a lot of cars going in out here. I walked up inside. I saw my two cousins, signing tickets with customers. Here, sign right here, sir. Cat back on the caddy. And they just seemed like they were having a good time. It wasn't the business that I wanted, but I liked the idea that they had a system that they learned from a franchise. And that's the first time I really was even thinking about franchise or even knew about it. And that's how it started.
And how old were you, Charles?
I was 21 years old.
So it's always interesting, the pathway that everyone follows. I think back of what motivated me to go to law school or all these other things. And maybe it has to do with insecurity or influence at such a young age to go out and explore as an entrepreneur. If you had to pinpoint, what created that or what was the motivation there?
I really have to say it was probably my parents and probably my mom and dad owned, I grew up in I was born in Brooklyn, but soon after we moved to Long Island and, my father worked for the American Airlines. He didn't make a lot of money. He bought a little house in, Long Island, and we were there till I was about 8 years old. And after he got laid off from the airlines, cleaning planes or whatever, he actually opened up a store in town called Honey Fashions. And it was a little clothing store. And my father didn't know it. I mean, again, you don't think about these when you're young. You just see he does it. And they had that business there for a while. And then they wanted to move back to Brooklyn because all the rest of the family was there. So about 8 or 9 years old, we moved back to Brooklyn and he opened up another clothing store called SCC Sportswear. Stood for my sister's names, initials. That didn't work out. But then my grandfather, when he came from Italy to here, he opened up a clothing factory. So he knew everything about it. But my father was like resistant. He didn't want to do anything with that. But at this point, he had a family. He had myself and my sister at the time. Once I have two, but at the time one. And so when that clothing store didn't work out, I remember he spoke to my grandfather. He says, "What do you think I should do?" He says, "Open up a factory. I can help you." So he opened up a clothing factory on 20th Avenue in Bensonhurst in 75th Street, 76th Street, actually. So as a kid, I would get out of junior high school. I'd go to my father's clothing factory, mostly women on sewing machines, sewing things. And, my mom was there doing the bookwork, and my dad was, making deals with all, Norma Kamali, Jeffrey Bean, Calvin Klein. They send all the stuff to him. But I was very inquisitive because I started with just sweeping the floors. And then I'd say, "Dad, what does that guy do? He comes there once a week. He fixes all the sewing machines." "Oh, what? Change the needles, the bobbins, the belts, adjusting." I said, "How much does he get paid?" And he told me, I want to learn that. So I started sitting with Bernie. I learned that. And then I said, "Dad, what is that guy comes down, he does like one day on Friday, he does all these patterns," and he goes, "Oh, well, that guy goes one day, he makes $1,000 in one. I want to learn that." So every party, like I saw the guys doing the pressing machines, and I don't want to learn that. That's too much work, and I don't care what it gets paid, but it wasn't a lot. And then I learned how to do the trucking. We used to load up the truck and send it out to Secaucus, New Jersey, where all the warehouses were for these guys. So I learned the ins and outs of the business as a kid through my teenage years, and it was like nothing to me. It was like my father used to pay me to whatever to do this. I tell him, "Dad, I want to get paid what that cutting does." "No, I'll give you a discount." No, if he gets paid that, I want that amount of money. So I actually was making pretty good money negotiating with my dad. And but at the same time, I had a friend that had an older brother who had a car stereo shop. And when I got my first car, I started hanging around that car stereo shop on the weekends, fussing with the car. And, then while I was there, he was like, "Hey, Charles, help that customer over there put the speakers in." "Okay." "Hey, Charles, go help that customer over there. He needs help buying a stereo." "Okay." And so that just gave me skills that I didn't even realize I was getting. And so I guess it got the bug. I saw my father did this. I was doing this. And I actually, after I got out of school, my father said, I said, "I didn't even know you were supposed to go to college. I thought you have to be a doctor or a lawyer. I didn't know you were supposed to go to college for any other reason. I didn't have, my parents didn't go to college. Nobody I knew went to college. But my friends started telling me they were going." I'm like, "Why didn't you tell me? I didn't know. I got at graduation, they're telling me they're going to college." And he goes, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I don't know." And I said, "I'm probably going to open a business." And then I went to my dad. I said, "Dad, what do you think?" He goes, "Charles, I just bought this new building, new factory. I got the old one. I still got the rent on it. I have so much overflow of the work that I do. You can do all the work from Kmart and Walmart. They give all the cheapest. I'll give you some of the operators and you." So I did that, and I started, and I did pretty good. And I don't want to go too long into it, but I actually designed my own clothing line, and I got $1 million order that I couldn't fulfill, and I terminated. But that's a little segue. But that's how I trademarked the name G-Force because I wanted to design my own clothing. When I was a kid, my father used to hold me by the hand walking down New York, and I'd see the big billboards, Calvin Klein. Like, "Dad, why can't we be that?" He goes, "Charles, I don't know how to do that. That's a different business. I do the work. I do the sewing and stuff, but they design it and they market it." I said, "Dad, if I ever go into this business, I would want to do that." And he said, "Charles, if you want to do that, that's your prerogative." So my thought was, if I open up this business, I can learn how to be my own designer. And I actually did. I actually put an ad in the Women's Wear Daily, and I hired a girl that was a designer for Norma Kamali, and she came and worked for me. Not worked for me, but she worked, and she, for I think it was $15,000. She designed my whole clothing line. And I actually made a Missy clothing line. I actually, don't ask me where I learned this. I trademarked it in G-Force at like 18 or 19 years old. And then when I was done, my father said, "That's amazing, that line." He goes, "What do I do now, Dad?" He says, "Well, now you got to go sell it." I'm like, how do you sell it? He goes, "Well, they have these in the big, the big box stores in New York, Neiman Marcus, Macy's. You go there at certain days of the week and they see all the buyers." I said, "Well, how do I?" He says, "Just get a garment bag, take some of your sizes and put them in there and go show them your line." But I was very timid. I was not thinking I was a sales guy. I was really scared to do it. I just didn't feel it, but I did it. And when I went up there was all these guys in suits and ties. And I'm like, I just felt like out of place, but I did go and they were like, "Okay, nice kid. Nice stuff, kid. Thank you." And they just were looking for the big brands. So after a few weeks of that, I told my dad, "I don't think this is really doing it." He goes, "Charles, I probably shouldn't have told you to go to New York. That's the fashion capital of the world. Why don't you go to one of the places out in New Jersey where they're not the top, and maybe you can get an order from that." So I went out to a department store called Bamberger's. And Bamberger's is a division of, I think, Macy's or Neiman Marcus. So I went out there. I made an appointment. And this time, the girl that was there was just a year or two older than me. She just got out of college. She was a buyer for the store. And she loved the stuff that I was showing her. And I felt more comfortable dealing with her because she was close to my age. She was pretty, and I was able to deal with her. And she seemed to like me and like the work. And then after about an hour or so with her, she actually tried on some outfits. This is great. It's great. I said, well, I have an old factory, and so I'm trying to do this myself. So she goes, you know what? I'm gonna do you a solid. I said, what? She goes, I'm going to give you a big order. I said, really? She goes, yeah. She took out this 8.5 by 14 sheet with carbon paper in it, and she wrote this, so I didn't know what the hell she was writing. So she goes, here. Now, just remember one thing. I'm going to give you this order, but remember, if this stuff goes well this season, you got to double down to add more stores next season, and you got to have the displays to display it. You have to make them your brand. I'm like, oh, okay, So I didn't even look at the paper what she gave me. I just, thank you so much. I'll make you proud. I went downstairs. I got in the car and I looked at the paper. And I'm like, oh my God, it's $1 million order. I said, $1 million? Oh my God. And there was no cell phones back then. So I was driving home as fast as I could to tell my parents, I got $1 million order. So I got in traffic from New Jersey going back to Brooklyn. And I walk into the house. My family, my sister's at the table, my mom and dad. I walk in, I go, here, we're rich. And my father goes, what do you mean? I'm like, I got $1 million order. And so my father just picked up the paper and he starts looking at it and he goes, son of a bitch, you really got $1 million order. And then he flips it over and all the fine print is on the back. And that's where, I didn't know. So from that point, we went to Chase Bank, which way it was. And, I learned about factoring and how do you get money. They wanted to put my father. I just didn't want to do that. So lo and behold, I actually, after trying to do that, I canceled the order because I called the girl up. I said, I'm really sorry. This is too big for me yet. I wish it was like the way it is today in Shark Tank. Hey, Damien, I got $1 million order. They wouldn't be able to. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know. I figured $1 million is probably going to cost me $500,000 to buy the fabric, the threads, make it, pay my people. And then you had to wait 90 days after you ship it to them for them to pay you. And then after that, if it doesn't sell, they send it back. So it was just too much of a risk and I didn't know what I didn't know. Lo and behold, I went back. I said, Dad, I canceled the order. The girl still says she'll do business with me when I want, but I just couldn't do it. And I didn't want you to put the house up or anything like that. So what can I do now? And he goes, Charles, instead of going big like that, why don't you go get the truck, go down to 3rd Avenue, get some cheap racks, and go around to all the mom and pop stores in Brooklyn, Queens, Long Island, Staten Island, New Jersey, and little mom and pop stores. You tell them, I'll put this rack of 2 or 3 dozen stuff. If you keep it by the register, I'll put it on consignment, and I'll come on once a week. You sign for it, whatever you sell, I'll do. So that's what I did. I sold out the whole line, and that's how I made $30,000 on top of the money I was saving and paid everything out. And that's really how I started. And then because along the way, I still had the factory, making money that I had, but this was my passion to do clothing. I was really good at it too, because I learned from my dad cutting all this stuff. So after I was done with that, I'm like, okay, well, I got the factory. My brother-in-law calls me up and says, hey, he just married my sister a year earlier and he's a pizza man. He's working his pizzeria in New York City, Vincent's Pizzeria on the corner of 32nd and Broadway. He says, the old man wants to sell it. And, they're doing good business here, but he doesn't know when he leaves in the afternoon, these guys are taking money from him. So it's a good price if we buy it. So I said, okay. So we bought the store. We went into the pizza business and I did that for about a year. And then when it came up to a year, the landlord calls up and says, listen, you're at the end of your lease. So, you guys got to get out soon. I'm like, what do you mean? We have a renewal option. He goes, no, if you read the lease, the renewal option is at the landlord's, not at you. And the bar next door wants to expand, and they're going to pay a lot more money. So that's when I started to realize I can't just rely on my father. My father knows what he knows, and he give me great skills and knowledge of what he knows, but he don't know what I need to grow. He couldn't help me in these other areas. And so with that, after the pizzeria was gone, sold, I still had the factory. And then I told my dad, I'm going to work out the rest of the year in the factory. I'm going to give the factory to my sister and my brother-in-law because he lost the pizzeria. So I gave it to them and I bought my one-way ticket to Florida to open up, my own stereo shop. And that's when the wheels fell off and I couldn't get the loans and I started to work at the place. But I think that I just learned my father went to work every day and worked. And it was never like even a decision for me. It wasn't like, should I get a job? I never had a job in my life. Every job I had was working in the factory and then going owning a factory and then owning a pizzeria and then coming down to Florida. And I did work for about 3 months in the car stereo shop. It was a big one called Sound Advice. It was one of the bigger group of, they did home as well as car. But I learned a lot from them in the short time I worked there. But that's when I found franchising. When my cousin told me, I went to New York and I met with him and I saw it. And like back to where I was in New Jersey, after I looked at that store that he had as a Meineke, we went out to lunch after my father and him and I, and he told me, here's the business card. If you're interested, maybe, they'll let you make a franchise down in Florida. So that's how it started. On the way back in the car to Brooklyn, because I was getting ready to fly back to Florida, my father says, Charles, this is probably a good thing for you. He goes, because they give you a roadmap, a blueprint. They help you get a lease, to help you get the loan. I mean, what else? That's the problems you're having. I said, yeah, Dad, it's not the business I want, but maybe there's a franchise in the auto aftermarket where I could do accessories and stuff. So before I signed this, let me go look. So I started to look that up when I got back home, and there was nothing. It was only mufflers, repairs, and tires. But my cousin did Meineke, so I called Meineke, and lo and behold, about 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail saying, you've been preliminary approved for a Meineke discount muffler shop. Your next steps are. I'm like, I called my dad. That is the first yes I've got since I'm down here. He goes, I think you should take it. I said, yeah, I think I'm gonna. And that's how it started.
I never know what to expect having these. I mean, I love this on so many levels because as friends on a personal level, I could reflect on why is Charles so stubborn with every lease and over accommodating with franchisees. But as at a deeper level too, Charles, as your children, and I think every day, sometimes I'm like, why am I so motivated? But I think at my stage of life, I'm actually just trying to prove something to my sons and my children and like demonstrate with actions. And then I think back too, where, my father was a city worker, but had a landscaping business, and when I think back of what motivates me, he wasn't a successful business owner, but I think the most impactful thing for me, more than stupid college or going to law school, in which I love what we do, was selling trees on the side of a road to people. We go buy them and have them on a truck and resell them, right? And I think that impacted me more than anything else. That, I would have never known all of this. And to think about how you as a son is subtly watching your dad, right? And what he's doing in your family. And I know for sure your children are doing the same thing. So we know the stepping stones going backwards. And now this deciphers for me a lot of, you're very passionate when we speak in the morning, right? Even if a franchisee's upset, you can't even understand why, and you're just trying to help. So how do you connect the dots with franchising now? You're about to open up an amazing headquarters. You have a significant number of locations. Tint World, in my opinion, is one of those very rare retail franchises that really balances out opportunity. How does it make you feel when you're thinking about the entrepreneurial journey of your franchisees and the stories you don't know, which may be next generation of some son or daughter watching their dad with their Tint World location and what that leads to?
When I see franchisees that I help be successful, that's the joy I get. I don't even look at the monetary income that I get. Like, that's just a scorecard. Like, I don't live up to the financial wherewithal that I could or I would. I just really am a simple guy. We have a nice house and it's car. We do nice, but we're not these extravagant. I'm not on the golf course. I really like building this. And I think it was because when I started, my wife moved down to Florida and she was going to college. I knew her from New York, but I didn't think I was going to, marry. I didn't plan on it. But when she came down, my mom called me up and said, remember Jeanette? Yeah, she's in Florida. Why don't you take her out? Mom, she's a kid. I don't want to. She was 4 years younger than me. Now, at 15, 16 years old, 4 years younger, that's young. But at 23 years old, 22 years old, when 4 years is like perfect, So that's when I dated her. And I told her, I started really getting close with her. And she was going to college. And I was just about opening up my first Meineke. And basically, after college, she would come to my office and she started doing the bookwork, just like my mom did. I didn't plan it. It just worked. Hey, can you help me do this? She was good at it. I was good at sales, marketing, operations, and I didn't really want to do the bookwork. It wasn't my area, but I knew it. I understood it, but she did it. And but yet she wouldn't come behind the counter and talk to a customer. It was funny. It was good. I get all these pictures of us behind the counter with kids. But so after about a year into the business with Jeanette, again, we're dating, and I told her after we get the first store open, we'll get married, because she gave me the ultimatum. I'm going back to New York if we don't get married. And I remember getting scared, and I said, okay. And I brought her a ring, and we got married and had a nice honeymoon, and we bought a townhouse. It was like the first year or so I had the first franchise. But now we're doing well, and I think we're doing great. She's doing the bookwork. And I go, Jeanette, I came down here, we got married. I want to go buy a Corvette, a brand new Corvette with a convertible, because that's why I came down here, to live like that. I said, so I can't have the stereo shop, but I could buy the Vet and I could custom it out, and I can still do what I'm doing. And she goes, Charles, I really appreciate all you do for us. You know, we got a nice townhouse. We got a good business. You took us on a good honeymoon to Hawaii. You know, you did everything right. He goes, but if you want to do something like that, you might have to go open up another one of these. I'm like, okay. I picked up the phone, I called Meineke, and I won another license. 3 or 4 months later, I had the next store open. And now we're into that next store for like less than a year. And I go, Jeanette, you know, this store is doing just as good as the other one do. And I says, can I go buy the Corvette? And she goes, you know what? Go ahead. I'm like, all right. You know, so I had one bucket of money that was paying our life. The second store was a second bucket of money that I was able to buy the car. We bought some nice jewelry. I bought my first watch down here. Started traveling a little bit more, but I was tending to the business. Now, this is so cool for franchising, because I want everybody to know this is really how I learned. It's nothing more. I used to go to the annual conventions. And when I went to the convention, I met a father and a son, and they were telling me that they had like 3 Meinekes, and they were opening up. They were buying the property and building their own building to lease it to the Meineke. I said, why are you doing that? He said, well, we get to own the property. Instead of paying the rent forever and it goes up, I can buy the property, pay it off over the term of the franchise, and then I could, if I want to, keep the business and make money on the business and the rent, or sell the business and just make the money on the rent because it's paid off. I like that. I'm like, I want to do that. And so I went back to my wife and I said to Jeanette, do you know what they're doing? I want to do that. I want to open the third store, and I want to buy the property. She goes, Charles, I see that you want to do that, and that's good, but like we don't have the money for that. If you want to do that, you might want to open up another one of these. I go, okay. I picked the phone, I called Meineke, and I said, I want another license. And so that was my third bucket for real estate investing. So I opened up the third store, and third store starts doing good. Now, this is when I started to learn multi-store management. It's completely different than single, even double. Like now why do I go to one and it goes down and the other one goes down? And so we learned all that. I got it sorted out. And when I was ready to go buy the next franchise, I actually was able to buy the property, and I got my GC license. And I built the building, and that was the first Meineke in the whole company that ever did over $1 million in the first year in business. And there was only a handful of 600 or 800 stores that ever did over $1 million, maybe 24. So that was a testament to me.
Charles, so because there's just so much valuable info here, right? So the next couple of questions. One is going to be how we get to Tint World.
Yes.
2, it's going to be, from your perspective as franchisor and former franchisee, what makes Tint World special? And then I want to get to knowing your journey, what advice you have for people that are franchising their business. And then I want to end with, what's an ideal franchisee, and what does it take to succeed as a franchisee? So next one, how do we get to Tint World? Successful Meineke. I think my in-laws may have worked the garment factory and whatnot in Brooklyn or New York, but how do you get from successful Meineke franchisee to opening up Tint World?
I opened up my last Meineke shop, which was the biggest one in the chain. It was the first Meineke that ever did over $2 million in sales. It was nearly a 10,000 square foot building. And I opened it up in 2001. That was the last one. That was like the 10th location I opened. And I owned the property and everything on all the ones after I started building. And at that time, I started having children with my wife. My wife had the first baby. And that's when
your wife started having children with you, Charles.
Older me, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm joking.
Yeah, together.
Yeah.
That's correct me if I'm wrong. So it was right in 1999. We conceived the first child, my daughter. And at that point, I was just getting ready. I was building the 2001. It opened up my last store. And I told her after this was a mammoth. I mean, I put so much, but this was like one that could have broke the bank. But I had other stores that were very, very well cash flowing. This one took a few years to really get it to even break even. But it was within the second or third year, I got to $2 million. $1 million was probably breaking even, where normally $1 million was killing it. But I got there. And that's when I started to learn how to really network. I was always the guy that did the basics, marketing, but now I still went to Rotary clubs, BNI meetings, going to the car dealerships. I mean, I just did anything. I was so scared. It's a big nut to cover. But I also learned that in like 2003, after 9/11, there was a little slowdown. But 2003, I had a banker next door that opened up a bank right next to my 18-bay Meineke shop. And he just was a car guy, and he just was intrigued with me. And he took me over and he says, I want to teach you about finance. I want to teach you about family limited partnerships and how you could protect yourself and you could have succession planning. I would love that, but I didn't know a thing. But this guy was a really astute business guy, suit, like really like a James Bond looking guy, really cool. Charles Boyce, his name was, in SunTrust Bank. And he just loved the cars, and I fixed up his car and he was so happy. But long story short is that he showed me that I took advantage of the market, because when I was buying these businesses, the interest rates were high, kind of like they are right now. But after 9/11 in 2003, the interest rates dropped like to 3-4%. So he helped me finance all my properties. I pulled out like a couple of $1 million, paid off the local little debt, and I think I started with $1.5 million into a family trust that he helped me set up. And it was, everything that you would ever want. And I started to learn. He taught me. And so that was another person that helped me in my life get to another area. I commend him for being that guy to me. So after that, I told my wife, because now we had the first child and the second one was on the way, my son. And I told her, I'm not going to open up any more stores for a while. With this big one that I did, I want to get a handle on it. I'm going to wait a while. And we did. About 2005, I told my wife, I think I want to open up more businesses. And she goes, really? Why? Why now? I'm like, well, I just feel like the other ones are still doing well. I sold a lot of the early ones, at least the properties, but now I had I think 3 left, 3 of the biggest ones, kept the property. So I said, I just want to open up the business that I always dreamed of. Nope, there's no franchise out there like it. I said, I think Meineke, they did a lot of good things, but I have ideas that they should have done other things. Like they didn't think about the franchisee in every way. And I named the list. And so then she goes, well, what do you want? I said, I want to build the business I always dreamed of. There's nobody doing it. I think it's a great business. And there's no franchise like it. So I could really be the guy. I mean, there's got to be other people like me that want that kind of business. So she says, well, how are you going to start? I said, well, I don't want to start from scratch. There's this company called Tint World, and I've been bringing my car there for years, since I came down here. And Tint World started in 1982, a year before I came down, the first location. Over the years, they built 6 locations. And so that's still a lot for a tint shop. Nobody really has that many at the time, especially. So I called up the guy from Tint World. I called the office and I said, hey, like to go out with lunch for me? My name is Charles from Meineke. And, oh, you're the Meineke. I mean, I was on the news. I was on TV. I just did a lot from growing the businesses. So people knew me, and he just agreed. We went out to lunch. I said, listen, I'm interested in buying your business. And, we talked about it. And a few months later, I bought the company and the rights to the name. And I trademarked the world. I literally was taking 10 countries at a time, in the most dominant ones all the way down to nothing, because I couldn't afford them all at one time, but I did them. But I remember I wanted to write the franchise system, and I wasn't sure. And I went to my dad on Christmas, and I was telling him, we're at the Christmas table, and I said, Dad, I think I could do this, but I got these stores, and Charles, you could do anything you put your mind to. He goes, everything you do turns to gold. He goes, Meineke would not have the business that if you didn't participate with helping them build their point of sale software, their website, and all the things you did. You're the leader in that brand. You could do this. My father, I'll tell you, if there's one thing you could ever tell your kids, is tell them that they can do it and that they're special. Because it made me feel like I could and I would, and I didn't want to disappoint him, as well as I felt confident. So he goes, what don't you like about doing it? What are you scared about? I said, well, I'm really not scared, but there's things I don't like. Is what? I don't really like all the accounting work. I have to automate that. I don't want to have, I used to go up to Meineke, they had 35 people collecting royalties and checks. I don't like that. I said, so I have to figure out a way to automate that where it's like ACH and it goes. I said, secondly, I have to have the point of sale where it ties to the bookkeeping. Because the reason why I couldn't open up more stores with Meineke is my wife was working harder than I was keeping up with the bookwork. So if I can make this automated bookkeeping system where franchisees could scale, and I got the point of sale data goes into QuickBooks Online. QuickBooks Online has an accounting company that they do all the work for you. I wouldn't have beat up my wife so much on doing so much bookwork. She used to work at the kitchen table, taking care of the kids with all these papers. I got pictures of it. It's crazy. So it slowed me down. And Meineke, I tried so hard to get them to do it. They didn't want it. They were focused on their growth, not on this. So that was another thing. So as it evolved, I got to a point where I thought of everything I want to do. He goes, what else don't you like? I said, I don't like the legal part. He goes, what do you mean? I said, I don't mind the document part, but I don't like these complaint parts. I says, I think that if they see a franchisee they can't do it, help them sell it. If they see a franchisee that needs help them grow. I said, but you can't treat them all the same. I said, I think there's things that they can do better. And I thought I could. I said, I could probably do this. I said, I think I can do it better. So my father says, well, Charles, figure out the problem. What do you need to fill this? What do you need to fill that? And build your system. And it got me clear on what I wanted to do. So at that point, it took me about a year to write the FDD. I filed franchising with all 50 states. I got approved in the first round. And then I needed a mentor. And so I looked around, and there was nobody really in Florida that I knew, but there was Sinorama. I read Ray Titus's story, and he was in college, and he wrote something about franchising, and he built this big company. So I called up and I said, guys, would you be my mentor? If I can come up there and talk about it, I'm a franchisee. I can't talk to Meineke about this, but I wanted to talk to you because now I got a franchise. And sure, come on up and talk to us. And I went there, and they were inspired by everything I said. They said they'll support me, coach me, and I did. And I signed on with them to sell my first year or so. I think 2007, we got franchising rights. In 2007, 2008, they helped me sell my first few. His right-hand man for international franchises was Tony Foley. So when I signed on with them to sell franchise for me, I met Tony's son, Anthony, who's just out of college working in the boiler room with phones over. This is Anthony. He's going to test. So Anthony, you'll come with me to Las Vegas. I'm going to take you to the SEMA show, show you what cars are all about. And then he fell in love with my business. And that's what you want in a salesperson, I guess. I told him everything about how I built it, what I did, so he would understand me and the business so he can explain it better. And then 2008 rolled around. And of course, that was a bad year for business, I guess, stock market, and really tough year. But I got a call from Ray Titus saying, Charles, I'm going to have to stop selling franchise for you. I got to tend to my own business. It was nice working with you, but I said, thank you, Ray, for all you did. But I knew in my agreement with him, I couldn't take Anthony because it was like, you can't hire any of his own people for a year or whatever. So then Anthony came for me. He goes, listen, I'm leaving there. I want to work for you. I'm like, but I can't, Anthony. He goes, well, maybe you could ask Ray. I said, I'm scared to. He goes, just give him a call. So I called up Ray and I said, Ray, I know we were separated, and our agreement says I can't hire anybody from you, but Anthony is asking me for a job, and I told him no, but I just want to know if he left you anyway, is it okay if he works for me? And he goes, Charles, most people wouldn't have even called. Yes, you can. I said, really? He goes, yeah. He goes, put it to me. I said, can you give me an email saying so I know that we have a commitment? And he emailed me that you can hire Anthony Foley. And from that point, I hired Anthony Foley. He was so happy, and he's been for ever since then, the guy's talking franchises for me. And so that's how that happened.
And you've built, outside looking in and interacting with your team, you have an amazing team. And it's funny when I see, seeing the backstory, because there'll be times where, Jeanette's at your office or whatever, and the value you guys put in each other. And Jeanette's, a big part of the company.
Yeah.
It's so interesting seeing the backstory, right, Charles? So if I had to ask you what makes Tint World unique as a franchise opportunity, what would be the foundational, what's the special place you said Tint World's in? I
think I tried to build a system that did everything good that Meineke did for me. And I also, everything that I wished that they would have done, franchisees always wish they could do something. Even my franchise, I wish I could do something better. This is the way it is. But I tried to build all the pieces and tools to automate them to get as much value out of it. I like franchises that have two really core things: fun and profitable. Because if they're fun, it makes you want to go to work every day. And it makes people happy. Your customers are happy. You're happy. Services you're doing is good. Profitable, really, it covers a lot of issues that might pop up with learning curves of different people from different. So it does help a lot of that. And we definitely have a profitable business. We have a high gross profit margin service, which is also heavily intense on technical bills. You're not getting a $15 an hour person to serve, hamburgers, which nothing wrong with that, but you're having to pay a little more for technical people to really do something that's skillful. But that allows it to be where you just can't buy it on Amazon. It's something you go to a store that specializes in it. So everything I've done, right from starting with a film cutting software that makes perfect cuts on window tint and paint protection film on cars, and adding the stereos in with a slim line. I didn't want a broad line. I remember back it was Crazy Eddie's at everything. I wanted to have a unique few brands that we were really good at, and people would go into like it. So I picked out, and I have a broad category of services because I learned from Meineke. Well, Meineke was a muffler shop. They just sold mufflers. And then, and I was in Florida. There wasn't a lot of snow and salt. So I started expanding, doing tune-ups and brakes and shocks and struts. And I learned that annually, year-round, different services for cars were more popular. So you get slow with mufflers, and sometimes of the year you get busy with tune-ups. Some you get air conditioning service. People want to pay for that. So I learned. I said I have to do this with Tint World. So when I bought the company, I added on all these categories of services so we can dominate and have one-stop shop where customers can come in and have anything aftermarket for the most part that was a profitable, good, quality service, and it would allow us to, as long as our franchises are getting trained on all the services year-round, they would always have something that's the busier product and service that they do in that time of the year, rather than have a lull on certain things. Because when I bought the Tint World, and they just did tinting and maybe some detailing, and they used to like really be slow from like September to February. So I had to figure out what's busy in aftermarket in those times, electronics around, Black Friday. And so I just siloed that out. And then I always wanted to do home services, but that wasn't my area of expertise. I said, okay, everybody can do home services with flat glass window tint. And it was pretty easy, but most people that are in the shop want to do car stuff. So it's an extra that they can go and do that. But, consumers today, they want to know if someone calls up to get their windows done, they don't want to hear a guy at the counter saying, I'll be right with you. Hold on, I'm with a customer. They want that call center responsiveness. So that's what we're launching here going forward is we're really going to launch the home services brand. So now people told me maybe you should separate it, maybe you should, but I really wish that I could have my franchisees have multiple streams of income, one for the automotive services, then we can market to the home services, then they could offer it to commercial buildings, because it's, again, profitable services, and that's where I'm expanding our company right now.
And I love the mindset of a business model that can't be replicated by Amazon, right? I think that's so foundational. Charles, the important question, going beyond Tint World, and I think this is where a great point to leave off, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, from a franchisee standpoint, and I'll preface this by saying it's an interesting perspective I have doing what we do and working with different franchise brands and seeing wealth creation, right? A friend of mine purchased a very, a retail-based franchise system years ago. And he did with the mindset of multiple locations. And his first location they thought was going to be a home run was a complete cash flow drain. Didn't work. And if he just ended there, it would have been checked off as a failure. But he didn't end there. And he opened up additional locations. And location 2 at a location he didn't expect to be profitable was cash flow positive like in month 1. And 5 years later, maybe as 8 or 9 locations, you're talking created generational wealth, right? And I'm always fascinated between the metaphor of like digging for gold and, you're 2 feet away and you quit, right? Or you sell your shovels. So beyond Tint World, for franchisees out there, entrepreneurs, people that want to take that leap, what's the mindset they should have? Like what creates success and what's going to create failure that needs to be avoided?
I think that, I'll talk about what creates success first, and I'll talk to you about what I think is part of the reasons why they may fail. The reason why you can be successful is because you can go with the mindset that I'm going to build this thing. Don't compare yourself to other people, other franchisees. You can learn from them, but your only competition is yourself the way you were last year. Like, how do I get better this year? I can learn from other people. I may not be for 5 or 10 years as good as some of these top, hopefully sooner, but don't be that. Be the person I'm going to get better every year, and you got to grind. It's nothing more than just, believe me, it wasn't easy for me. I made it fun. I was lucky enough to go every day in the morning with my wife back to, but right now I'm trying to not talk about my story. I'm telling you about it. But what I'm trying to do is create their story. And their story is there's stages of a franchise. And then I'll tell you there's also stages of a franchisor. And I can tell you about that one too, because I'm learning every day. So stages of a franchisee is they get in, they learn the business, work your ass off, keep your payroll in line, keep your expenses in line. Don't over budget. Don't build the Taj Mahal in the first one. Get in there, get it going and figure it out and learn from other franchisees and be friends with your franchisor and love your brand. Don't blame them if you're not doing well. Ask them, how can I do better? They usually will help you. And so will other franchisees. The minute you start blaming somebody else for your for your errors, you basically are now becoming the person who's an employee that somebody else is telling you what to do. If you own your mistakes and make them better, you will get better every day. I never looked at anybody but myself. I used to, what do I do to get better? I always did that. And I tell my wife, what can I do? Why am I not doing as good as my cousin Roland in New Jersey? And I wound up beating him. What do I do is get the number one guy. How do I get that better? I go to the conventions. I'd call them up. I go on vacation with my wife to Virginia, and I say, Jeanette, they have a new Meineke over here. Go to the mall, and I'm going to spend the day with these guys. I wanted to learn something. I spend the day with them, and I'd learn like 3 different things. I learned so much from other franchisees, but you can't know it all, and don't say that it's somebody else's fault. It's what you make of it. And like I said, maybe even fail on the first one. It's very rare, but if you do, that's why people go with the franchising, because there's a very high success rate. But the minute you stop blaming yourself for your success or your failures, the minute you're really lacking going to be a successful person. You have to own it, build it, run it, and get better and compete only with yourself every single day that you go into work. Don't just go have other people run it for you. Be the master of your domain and grow it. To me, that is really the reason why I think the people that become successful become very good. The pitfalls, they come in with the mindset that I'm going to own a business so I don't have to work. I'm going to own a business so I don't want to use my own money. So usually you got to put some of your money and some of the finance. You just go and borrow everything. And sometimes in life, the way the country works, they'll give the money away to you for whatever you ask. And sometimes in life, they'll really be stringent on making sure that it's balanced for the franchise. So if right now in the last few years, it's been take the money and high interest rates, and that makes it harder for you to get successful quicker. So these are some of the things, and don't look at anybody else. Look at what you can do. Start small. My first store was a 3 or 4 bay store. I didn't start with a 20 bay. I didn't go look at the biggest guys in the franchise. I started, I learned it, I owned it, I built it. Went to the next one, a little bigger, a little better. And every year I got better, and I never thought of myself as the best. I thought myself as one of the best. And then how do I learn from other people? I always want to continue learning. My father always used to tell me, whenever you think you know everything, that's when you stop learning.
Well, that's when you get hurt and you get hit in the head. Charles, your experience as a franchisor or the stages, what's your advice for business owners out there that want to franchise their business, emerging franchisors that want to get to building something like you've built? What's advice you'd have for them?
For franchisees, potential franchisees that want to own a franchise, find something not just what you like. Because
No, I mean for franchisors.
For franchisors, it's just like a franchisee. There's steps that you're going to learn. If you're a first-time franchisor, the first 20 is going to be a learning curve, and you're going to do a lot of hustling because you can't afford all the staffing to give them everything they need. When you get to 50, you might be able to start getting some resources, but you can't probably get top talent at that time. You're probably getting some people that you're going to coach. So make sure you hire people with a good heart. They got to love the franchisees. They got to want them to win because that's how we win. Then when you start getting to 100, close to 100, that's when you could start to semi-scale, where you can start to really start selling more and investing more money into people and learning to streamline the systems. But I tell you, once you get over 100, it's a whole other level. I mean, I didn't think it, but you hear about these things. You get over 100, it's like the founder, if whoever's in charge of running the business, it's not you and each franchisee anymore. It's like you have to depend on your team to have the relationship with them that you've built up to 100. When it gets beyond 100, it's too many people to serve by yourself. So then as you get to closer to 150, oh my God, like I don't even remember someone I'm so pissed at myself for not remembering them. So I really got to count on my team to give me feedback on everybody and make sure that I'm knowing everybody. So I think that there's stages of a franchisee and the stages of a franchisor. And there was a couple of weeks ago, there was somebody that you had on your podcast Charles, I learned from you and your experience with all these brands you work with. And I learned from most of the people that come on here something new. One guy told me, he said, this is like my second or third franchise brand he built. And I remember he said, after I get to 100, I like to sell them. And I'm like, if you would have told me that 3 years ago, I would have said, why? Let's get to $1 billion. And I understand why. It's a completely different level once you get over 100. It gets tougher, it gets different, and you got to rely on other people around you, and you hope that they're just as good as you are when you are having the relationship with these franchisees. So that was a really good understanding for me, because I didn't really, you live in this stuff your whole life, but you don't know until you hear somebody else say it, and they go, that's a good point. Why do people want to sell at a certain point because it's not that same business model you built. And I love the touch points by helping franchisees. So I would say know those stages, know where your exit strategy is, or if you have a family that's going to come in, you really start have to get over 100, some higher quality players that done it and they can help you get there. It's not the same. Building a small brand is great and fun, especially if you're a loving person that doesn't need the money, where you treat your franchise really well and it's not about the money, it's about this build. But at the same time, once you start getting over the 100 mark, you got to think about how you're going to operate that business because it's not going to be the same.
Charles, I love it. You know, forever in my head. To me, Tint World's origin started in a garment factory in New York there. So yeah, I mean, we talk so often, and I'm like, I was really wanted to hear this story. So I appreciate it, Charles.
I'm happy to tell it and happy to be with you. And you're an awesome guy. And one of the reasons why when I started working with you, what I love most about you is because you're just what a franchisor needs, because you care about the franchisee. It's never about being upset or being angry or not understanding them. It's about how do we get them to love us and be better. You know, you really have that human intelligence. You're not a legalese. You're a guy with a heart and a passion, and you have a very broad scope of knowledge. And I really appreciate that because, you know, you don't get that in a law firm anywhere that I know of.
Charles, that's very kind. And it's a privilege working with you guys. Charles, thank you so much.
Thank you, Charles. It's been a pleasure.